keep reminding yourself why you're in this craft to begin with, and in this business to begin with, but also be the author of your own story. Um, be the hero of your own story and make your movie. Make your movie. Put up your play. Always be creating.
Well, I am recording. I feel like we kind of already started. I mean, I was going to do a nice little intro. I feel like we don't even have to. We've rolled right into it. For anyone who's picking up now, I'm talking to Spencer Garrett, who's an actor, in the words of the aforementioned Jeremy Gordon, who has been in everything. Jeremy's words were Spencer has been in everything. He's the kind of actor you've seen in just about anything you can think of, which is probably a fair comment to make. How you've been working, we were saying earlier, how have you found sort of working in the COVID kind of landscape and the pickups you were doing on the show last week?
It was interesting. It was my first time back since everything shut down. I did a couple of really wonderful projects in February and March. I was working on a show called Goliath, which is a great show on Amazon that Billy Bob Thornton stars in, and he directed me in this particular episode. And then I went from that to another film called The Comey Rule, which is a miniseries about James Comey with Jeff Daniels and Holly Hunter and Michael Kelly, and that's coming out right before the election. And then right after that, I went into a really intense 2-week gig on Chicago PD. I was in Chicago, and there were sort of rumblings that things were starting to shut down a little bit. And right in the midst of filming, somebody on the set of a show that was filming next door to us contracted COVID or tested positive for COVID, and they shut the studio down. And we were in the middle of filming our last couple of scenes. And so that was around March 13th in Chicago. And I'd been going out at night. I'd been going into restaurants and bars and things. Everything was sort of normal life. And then all of a sudden, boom, it just like a curtain came down and it shut down. So we finished the show, and I was home on March 14th back in LA, and then everything closed down for good. So I managed to get some work in, and fortunately, we're doing some reshoots on Goliath. So it was my first time stepping back onto a set in 6.5 months or whatever it is. And I remember having a little bit of panic, thinking, God, I hope I haven't forgotten how to act. It's just like I've been, we've all been sort of trying to find other things to do to occupy our time and our lives and our minds and our hearts. And so I haven't done any acting in 6 months. I mean, I've done some Zoom stage readings and some plays and some screenplay readings, things like that. But being back on a set, which is sort of my natural habitat, walking back onto a sound stage, it was an odd feeling. And we had to get tested, as I told you earlier. We all had to get tested 3 times before we went back on the stage. We all wore face shields and masks on the set, and then right before they started rolling, we took our masks off. It's a weird new world, and it was tricky to adjust to it. But Amazon, this particular production, is the first thing I've been back on. They really handle it beautifully. I mean, it shoots up in a place called Santa Clarita, which is about 45 minutes north of Los Angeles. So I had to drive back and forth twice to go back up there and get tested. And they won't let you, they take your temperature every time before you walk on the set. They do one of those head zapper things. So they're doing it right. And things are slowly starting to open up in Los Angeles. I have several friends that have gone back up to Vancouver to work on their shows there on Supernatural and The Good Doctor and things like that. You have to quarantine in Vancouver for 2 weeks in your hotel. I love Vancouver. I worked there many times over the years. I can't imagine quarantining in your hotel room for 2 weeks. It's a little, you'd go a little stir crazy. But so we'll see what happens. But I wrapped on Goliath yesterday. You and I tried to get together, obviously, a while back, a couple weeks ago, and I was stuck on set there. So I'm glad we we were able to connect. But yeah, it's a strange time, but they're navigating it nicely, and I know actors are eager to get back to work, and so the productions that are doing it right, hopefully we can stay safe and keep our wits about us and do some good work as we move forward.
It's slow and steady, I guess, because nobody really
So
knows what we're dealing with. And I think it's going to take maybe the likes of the Amazons and the Netflix and all these bigger players who have
indeed.
maybe the money and resources to figure it out a little bit and show the
Yeah.
way for the rest of us. I don't quite know how maybe an indie film would be able to operate just now trying. I'm sure they maybe can and are, but it's going to be pretty difficult for those guys because I just can imagine financially it's going to be such a big extra cost.
I'm doing an indie film. I'm starting an indie film on Monday
Right.
and sending someone to my house on Saturday to give me a COVID test. And there's going to be a nurse on the set, and so it's a low budget indie film. I think it's sort of a medium budget, maybe $500,000. But they're no matter what the contract is, they have to abide by the rules, otherwise they're going to get shut down. So again, this is a low budget, micro budget film, and they're testing everyone. It's Anna O'Reilly, a wonderful actress, Anna O'Reilly and Austin Nichols and me. It's a three-hander. So
Right.
fortunate, it's a cast of three only. It's kind of a filmed stage play, so it makes it a little bit easier to deal with. But
Sure.
there's just probably a crew of about 20, so everybody's going to get tested, and we'll do our thing and hope for the best.
I guess that's it, isn't it? It's going to be trying to keep the numbers down a little bit for the smaller projects and keep those crews to, 20, 30 people if you can, and not into the hundreds. When you were filming just the other day, how was it approached when it came to actors on set when you were actually coming to things like blocking? Were you actually being positioned further away from the other actor to then perform against them, or was
Not necessarily because we were doing a reshoot of something that we had shot before. It was really just for performance. The other actor in the scene with me, Billy Bob, wanted something different this time around that he didn't necessarily get the first time back in February. So we basically reshot the exact same scenes in the same places. We just in this particular case, what we did yesterday, we were sitting 6 feet across from each other. They moved the chairs a little bit farther apart. It was me interviewing this person in his office. So I remember when we shot it in February, we were a little bit closer to one another. In this particular case, and they moved the chairs a little bit farther apart, so they cheated from the camera. So that's about it. But we had our masks on, and right before he called action, we took our thing off. They put it in
literally
a Ziploc bag, and yeah. J.K. Simmons, wonderful character actor, J.K. Simmons. I had a scene with him last week, and he and I were sitting across from one another in chairs. I'm interviewing him. This is in a different thing that we were shooting, and they repositioned us a little bit. They kind of retweaked the blocking just a little bit, but pretty much it was the same stuff that we did. So, every case is going to be different, but if you can do some wonderful camera trickery and cheat the angles, hopefully they will. But the crew members, everybody was kind of very spread out on the floor. Everybody was masked. So I felt very comfortable walking back onto the set. And then once I started to feel comfortable, I thought, oh, maybe I do remember how to act. So
I guess that's it, right? Let all the other stuff that's nothing to do with performance kind of sort of, get allayed and calmed, and then not have that in your head and just do. I mean, you've been doing this for that long that I don't think you'd forget that kind of inherent ability to act. I think it's more the worry and concern and just like lack of knowing that we all have.
It does add a layer of kind of anxiety to, in terms of, you're aware of everybody around you, and are they being too close? And but once I got the feeling that, I feel comfortable with the way they're handling this, then I was just able to just kind of relax and do my job.
It is crazy. It's interesting to me from the crew side as well. I have a friend who's a DOP. He's on a shoot now, and it's the same there. They're all masked up. But he was saying how interesting it is psychologically for him, because for them to communicate with each other, he's realizing like how not difficult it is, but just how different it is when your mouth and nose is blocked, and just that nonverbal communication for the crew members who are normally quick at doing, verbal cues go out the window. It's more just a look, and that's gone now for some of them. And it's a fascinating shift that we're all going through. From your side, because I know from the beginning,
I have to say that being said, the series, I was about to start filming a television series for HBO in June, that is all about basketball. And it's for Adam McKay, who did Vice and Ron Burgundy and a lot of
Big
great
Short,
comedy.
Suspicion,
Exactly.
Succession.
My favorite show, my TV obsession. I'm
It's
obsessed with that show.
Great. And you'd fit in that world.
Oh yeah, I went up to Adam the first day on the set when we started filming. This show is called Showtime. It's about the 1980s LA Lakers with Magic Johnson and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Oddly enough, it's called Showtime, and it's going to be on HBO. So we'll let them figure that out. But I went up to Adam. The first thing I said to Adam McKay, I walked up to him and I said, "Dude, I will carry a spear on that show. I have to. You gotta plug. In fact, look, I even have my.
Oh, I wasn't even paying attention. You have a
Royco. That's how much I love Succession. So if you're watching, Adam,
that's amazing. I'll make sure I'll get on Twitter.
It's a show about. A lot of what we shot. I play Chick Hearn. I play the broadcaster for the Lakers, who was a sort of legendary guy. He was the voice of the Lakers for 50 years, and a lot of what we shot in the pilot was crowd scenes, in basketball arenas and basketball players running up and down the court. And I knew we were supposed to start shooting our 10-episode season in June. And as soon as this thing hit, I said, there's no way that's going to happen. You're going to have guys bumping into each other on the court and running up and down and close contact. So we got the call several weeks ago that we're pretty much shut down until next April. So, God willing, we're back at it in April, but I knew that there was no way they were going to be able to pull that off, no matter how many tests and masks and temperatures you take. It's just you can't do a show about sports in the middle of a pandemic.
Not if you want to do it well, and that's the whole point of doing it well. Yeah, I guess we can't see this far ahead at the moment. Like that's pretty much an hour at a time was peak lockdown. Now it's like a day at a time. I guess they'll reevaluate in April, and fingers crossed. And in the meantime, I'm seeing the Waystar mug every time. I can't help but notice it. Now I'm expecting like Kendall to burst in or something and start grilling you over
he's extraordinary. All of those actors, Jeremy
it's such
Strong
a perfect cast. Kieran Culkin,
perfect cast. Alan Ruck is an old friend. He plays sort of the wayward brother,
the other brother.
Yeah, that lives on the on the ranch in
New Mexico, isn't it?
And I'm just like every time I see him or talk to him or text with him, they're actually going back to work. They're going back to work soon, I think, in New York. And so he gives me little tidbits, little updates on what's going on. But all of those actors, Matthew McFadden and Sarah Snook. Oh, they're tremendous. So I'm a fanboy when it comes to that.
I can tell.
Writing is just delicious.
It's and obviously the showrunner did more of like a comedy style kind of over here initially in the UK, and then he sort of moved into this. People call Succession sort of like a drama comedy hybrid. I don't quite feel that personally. I see it just as a pure play drama with characters who have moments that
Yeah, I mean, they're all so. It's funny because every single member of that family is so awful, but you find yourself rooting for some of them at certain times.
Mm.
There's the right, like I said, the writing is so delicious, the acting is so wonderful. I mean, Tom Wamsgans, the guy that Matthew McFadden plays. I mean, he's so awkward and funny, but sometimes your heart breaks for him, like you feel for him. But they're all terrible people. So at various times, you find yourself rooting for these terrible people. Was it done as a comedy initially in the UK? Is that what you're saying?
No, no, no. I'm saying the showrunner's past work on different
Oh, I see.
shows
I see. Yeah,
is,
Jesse Armstrong. Yeah,
yeah, it's more in the comedic kind of realm.
right.
So it was sort of weird, not weird, but it seemed like a stretch to then have him do this show
Yeah.
about about like these big media moguls kind of ripping on the Murdoch family a little bit. But apparently he had a speculative feature script or something about the Murdochs in play about a decade ago. So he's always been fascinated with that world, and I think the depth of research he's done now translates when you just see the nuanced level of the writing. I hope you get in it. I can see you fitting in that world.
I think it might happen. I did a last summer. I was lucky enough to have been invited to do a stage reading of a play. There's a place here in the States in East Hampton called Guildhall, which is an old theater in East Hampton, and they get wonderful actors to come and do readings. And I did a reading with Brian Cox, and I was trying to keep my cool around him, during the rehearsals because and all I wanted to talk about was, I mean, but his career is
Great actor. What an actor.
extraordinary. Great actor, great guy. So they had just gotten back from shooting all of the stuff on the yacht in Croatia where they filmed it. So I got to pick his brain about that a lot, which is fun. But it's based on the Murdochs, but not based on the Murdochs. But if there was anybody that was long overdue to have somebody taking the piss out of them, it's that family. My God, the way, I mean, between Fox News and the New York Post and all of the things that they own and the kind of news content that they put out, Fox News is doing a very nice job of destroying the United States right now in its own insidious ways. So anything that can knock them down a few pegs, I'm all for it.
Yeah, I think in some ways it's that whole thing of, the stronghold of what were these. It's still kind of our pinnacle media companies where the power lied in the hands of half a dozen people still is there, but it's slowly kind of getting taken away from them. And I think they're kind of having a last hurrah, like a last grasp at trying to keep control. But I just think with the internet, it's almost impossible to control that now that people can distribute content and information through different channels, Facebook, Instagram, whatever it might be. It changes the game a little bit for people like that, where the power isn't in the hands of just a few people. And I suppose that's a slightly rough, but I'm going to take it anyway, a rough segue into what you guys did with quarantine when we talk about sort of making projects and then putting content out using these new platforms. I spoke about it with Jeremy. I've spoken about it to Jerry. So now I'm kind of really intrigued to get your perspective from the actor producer point of view of, I guess, how quarantine came to be through your prism of looking at it. And then I guess a little bit about what the experience was like for you at that time, which is going back, was it 4 or 5 months ago now that you were filming it and doing it?
Yeah, I think we started really around the end of March. I had come back from the Chicago gig on March 14th or 15th, and I think I was home for about 10 days. And I remember thinking, because LA had been locked down, all of the restaurants were shuttered, everything. And I thought, all right, shit, now what do I do? I know, I'll go out and buy myself a ukulele.
Okay.
And teach myself how to play the ukulele. And I bought a ukulele and a guitar, and I started taking music lessons on YouTube, trying to learn a new instrument, reading a lot of books, cooking, in finding new recipes every night. I was trying to find things to keep my juices flowing, um, I bought the Criterion collection, of films. So I went down a rabbit hole of foreign films and just, anything I could do. And then Jerry, out of the blue, Jerry reached out to me and he said, now this Jerry Ying, who you interviewed, Jerry and I
Yeah.
met years ago on, we were flown out to Hawaii to do an episode of Hawaii Five-0. And we were there for about 2 weeks together and we became pals. And so I knew Jerry as primarily just an actor, and we hadn't talked to each other in a couple of years. And he reached out to me and he said, I have this idea for a show about a bunch of out-of-work soap opera actors that have been sidelined by the pandemic. I'd love you to play like the patriarch of the family, the guy that's been on the show the longest, and he's sort of the father figure of the show. I said, great, I'm in. Like, what do you want? When do we start? I was already getting bored with the ukulele. So I said, yeah, I said, when do we start? He said, well, let's sit down and talk about it. I said, I said, I'd like to, I said, if you bring me on board as a producer, I need to get my nails dirty. I want to get in there and I want to be able to help shape what we're doing. I wasn't just comfortable just being an actor for hire. I really wanted to help shepherd this thing as much as I could. I also have good relationships with people at the Screen Actors Guild and the Screen Actors Guild Foundation. Jerry said he wanted to do this to raise money. Primarily, the whole thrust of this whole concept was to raise money for the Screen Actors Guild AFTRA Foundation, the COVID-19 Relief Fund.
Yeah. And
that's when I said I'm in. I'm all in because it's very near and dear to my heart. And so I said, let me produce this with you. Very, very quickly, it became evident that we were going to need a casting director. And I said, oh, I know the guy. And I said, you need to talk to Jeremy Gordon. Jeremy became invaluable to us because he has great relationships with actors, with agents, with the Screen Actors Guild. So he was able to, he did every actor's deal. I mean, we all did this for free. First of all, all 12 of us, all of the actors came on board. We did it for free, but he still had to do contracts. Jeremy still had to do contracts with the actors. So he had to talk to every single actor's agent to negotiate a contract, or, not negotiate, but to formulate it and get it in writing. So there was a lot of paperwork involved, a lot of red tape with the Screen Actors Guild. Jeremy cuts through all that stuff like butter because he's so good and so smooth. So we were up and running from the time Jerry called me and said, do you want to do this? And I said, yes. And then maybe 2 weeks later, we had our first Zoom meeting with the entire company. I was brand new to Zoom at the time. I'd heard of it, but I don't think I'd even been on Zoom at that point. I had no idea how much of a part of my life it was going to be at that time. When this whole thing is over, if I never have another Zoom, play reading or, I'll do podcasts with you, all the time. But I'm a little zoomed out. But at the time, I was like, great, let's do this. So we got the cast together. We figured out how we were going to do it. We had Jerry in his home with his computer and two other sort of DPs in their homes on their computers, and they filmed the scenes. So I'm in my house. If I'm doing a scene with Alicia Minshew, for example, who played my wife on the show, she's in New York City. So we had to navigate the time change and all of that, and the lighting coming through her window at a certain time of day in New York. So there were a lot of things that we had to sort of stumble over and fumfer our way through as we went along. And so if you look at the first week of episodes, the first 5 or 6 episodes that we put up initially on YouTube, and then we moved over to IGTV, to Instagram, the first 5 episodes were a little clunky and a little disjointed. We weren't really sure what it was the hell we were doing, but we were having a hell of a good time doing it, and we just knew that it was going to get better and better and better. I don't know how much Jerry and Jeremy told you about our process, but Jerry, who is a father of, a husband and a father of a teenage girl who had his own life and his own stuff going on in his own life, Jerry would basically sit in his office at home and come up with the storylines for the next day. And then he would email them out to all the cast members and say, this is what you're going to be talking about to this character, and this is what you're going to be talking about to this character. And then we would sort of marinate in that, and then we would get on Zoom all day Friday and all day Saturday, and we did what we called guided improv.
Yeah.
There was no script, there were no lines written. It was basically like the scenario, the scene, and we just kind of worked our way through it, and we did multiple takes of each scene until Jerry, who directed the episodes, felt like there was enough of a spontaneity and a reality going on and a flow of the scene that he felt like we got it. Because you can't edit on Zoom. You have to get one good, clean take.
Yeah.
So that's what we did, and we just got better and better and better at it as we went along, and we slowly started raising money for the SAG Foundation, and that's kind of how it all started. But it started out as kind of like, hey kids, I got some costumes in the barn, let's put on a show, and everybody was on board, and everybody was excited to do it, and the level of enthusiasm from all of these other cast members, all of whom, by the way, to this day, I have never met in person.
Oh, really? I was under the assumption that like some of you guys already knew each other from the actor side. I
think some of them knew one another. The
Right.
only Ella Thomas, who is she was one of the married couples with the little boy. Ella was the only person of those whole 12 actors that I had actually met in person years ago. I've never met a single one of them people. To this day, I've never met any of them in real life, which is just bananas because we can't have a rap party.
Yeah. Well, you can over Zoom. Rap party. Come on.
No, we're gonna do it. We're gonna do it right, and we're gonna do it in person because we thought about having a rap party on Zoom, but by the time we were done after 25 episodes, people were ready to move on. So
yeah, it's crazy. I think I remember Jerry saying that the initial schedule was it 5 episodes or something a week, or there was like quite
5 episodes a week,
and then he moved down to 3 because he realized that's just a lot of work. And
5 eepisodes a week on YouTube, and we pretty quickly realized that YouTube is sort of like the MySpace of today. It just we were not getting the kind of traffic that we wanted. And Instagram TV, IGTV, was just a hipper, sexier platform. And we instantly, once we moved over to IGTV, we got more eyeballs and more viewers. Word of mouth spread. And then I was able to, I reached out to some of my fancy, kind of higher profile actor friends. And I said, look, if you're not doing anything, and everybody was like, are you kidding me? I'm not doing anything. What do you want? What do you want me to do? And I said, well, we're doing this show. I said, will you come on and, play with us for an hour or two? So we had Steven Weber, from Wings and Studio 60, and we had Willie Garson from Sex and the City, and Rob Morrow from Billions and Northern Exposure. There's a wonderful internet star here in the States, and I don't know if he's crossed over there yet. His name is Randy Rainbow. Randy does, if you Google him, Randy does, he does musical parodies, political parodies about the Trump administration. And he basically rewrites Broadway show tunes, and he rewrites them as musical parodies about Trump or Pence or whatever's going on politically. And he's become a bit of a legend here in the States. Huh. So we follow each other on Twitter. And so I sent him a DM on Twitter. And I said, I'm doing this silly little show on Instagram TV to raise money for actors in need. And he said, when do you want me? So, Randy came on board. That was huge for us. We had Jeannie Francis, who was a great soap star from General Hospital. She did our finale. She ended up marrying. She officiated the wedding of my character to Bree Turner's character at the end of the show. So we got great people to come in and do these little cameos. and it boosted our viewership, and it's helped the word of mouth spread a little bit more too, which was
It's
great.
smart because it's basically using the audience that other people have and plugging into them a
Right.
little bit, and you're all just creating together, but helping from a distribution perspective do that together. It's not just relying on going to a traditional one-stop shop distribution company and letting
Yeah.
them do their thing. And that's an amazing thing to think of because it puts a lot of the power back into the hands of the creators, of the actors, of the independent filmmakers
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
Would you say from an acting perspective, one of, if not the biggest changes you've seen over your time is the advent of these social media tools from a networking and business perspective, craft aside
Oh,
here?
absolutely, 100%, 100%. I mean, I kind of came late to the ball game with Twitter and Instagram and stuff like that. I kind of wanted to avoid it. I'm a little bit more of an analog guy. I still use a file of facts. I mean, I still write my daily appointments out, with pen and paper. But
There's
I did
something to be
find
said for that, I think.
there is. I'm a tactile. I have to get my Sunday New York Times, in person and read it in person. Something about the feel of the paper and the ink and turning the pages that I won't be able to get rid of.
And just writing something out as well in this sort of different way. It's a different process of pen to paper. You're actually creating the words, whilst digitally it's still good, but it doesn't quite have
Yeah.
the same je ne sais quoi behind it, I suppose.
But as far as the art of shameless self promotion, when it comes to Twitter and Instagram and Facebook, I mean, I use those platforms for me personally. I mean, I posted the clip of the trailer of the Comey Rule that's coming out at the end of the month. I'll post those things just to sort of generate some buzz and sometimes my following will increase, but basically it's just to raise awareness of things that I'm doing, things that I'm working on. Other people use those platforms for other purposes. For me, it's in lieu of having a personal website. I've always used my Facebook page as hey, I'm going to be, I've got this film coming out next month. Hope you'll support it. And I also use it to support other actors and artists and filmmakers as well. So it's good for me in that regard. I'm a big proponent of paying it forward, and I love to sort of support, especially now when everybody's sort of like, grinding their wheels trying to figure out what the next move is. So for me, supporting other actors and filmmakers and doing it through social media is good. I'm not as masterful at it as Jeremy is. Jeremy is an incredible user of social media and knows how to do all the filters and the apps and all the things and the animation and all those things. I wish I was. I don't have that millennial vibe in me. I mean, most of my millennial friends are very adroit at all of that sort of stuff. I wish I was better at it, but it'll take me 2 hours to figure out how to upload a clip of something. But as long as I can get it out there and get the word.
It's a tool, not a lifestyle. I mean, it is a lifestyle for many people, but I think the perspective that you have of these things is pretty important. I've sort of had a parallel life over many years working in digital marketing, which when I bring
wow.
this up on the show, sometimes I have friends who listen in and they're like, "You're talking about marketing again." So if you're listening to that, Wally, then I'm sorry, but deal with it.
Yeah, Wally. Deal with it, Wally.
Exactly. But the thing about it is I've seen how the Google and the Facebook stuff works a little bit behind the scenes, and understanding how they really work gives you a different perspective as to how and what you're wanting to maybe share on there, but also how you can use them in a way that's more from a producer's perspective and not just a consumer's perspective.
Mm-hmm.
I think that they're very insidiously created to be all about consumption. So they get people buying in to consume content, consume information, consume whatever they're selling you, hit you with that dopamine when you get a like on your picture or whatever it is. And it's this just vicious sort of loop that you get trapped in. if that's all we're doing, I think we're using the tools in the wrong way. I think if we're using it from a producer's perspective, because you have something to talk about, whether it's you're well-known actor or politician with a message who can spread a message, or whether it's that you have a show or a product or a service, then I think they're really amazing tools, because they're equalizers, where when there were barriers to entry to a market 10, 20 years ago, these let you as a creator put your creation into the world, and then it's up to how good your creation is, but it gives you the chance.
100%.
And that's always been my take on how to use them. It's great, yes, post pictures of your dog, but don't just if we're just using it to get validation, I think it's a dangerous trap to fall into.
I mean, my first foray into putting content out onto social media in an entertainment fashion, 3 years ago, Jeremy and I produced a podcast called America 2.0. And it was a political drama, a dramedy, I guess. I hate that word, but it was a sort of in the vein of the West Wing. And it was, we had Patrick Adams from Suits, and Lawrence Fishburne and Kate Walsh. Jeremy and I got together. We got an amazing cast together. We put this podcast together. We did 10 episodes, and it was extraordinary. We became the #1 podcast in the US, UK, Ireland, Australia, France. It did very well, largely thanks to probably I call it the Morpheus boost. We had largely thanks to Mr. Fishburne. People were intrigued, but also, I mean, Patrick Adams is a star here in his own right. We had great writing, great acting, and I don't think I knew what a podcast was before we got involved in that. I'd heard of them, but I didn't really realize the reach that they had. And ultimately out of 500,000 podcasts that exist on the web, we became #1 in the arts and entertainment. So that was a big deal for us, and we had fans in Turkey and Russia and Ireland and France, all over the country. We had people writing to us, and I was like, wow, there's somebody listening to our little 6-minute long pod. It was each episode was 6 minutes long. There was somebody listening to us from Istanbul and Aix-en-Provence in France. There was a woman who became a huge fan of ours and would send us homemade jam and named after our podcast. Things. It was amazing the reach that this thing had, and we didn't really do a lot in terms of promotion. It was really the cast and the word of mouth that got us out there. Because, man, if you're making something good, we found if you're making good product, it will find its way into the consciousness. And with quarantine, the same way. I mean, we had a great launching pad with the SAG-AFTRA Foundation. Courtney B. Vance, who's the president of the SAG Foundation, gave us a great sort of boost off the diving board. And when Jerry and I did an episode with him, with Courtney Vance, basically saying this is what we're doing. It is to raise awareness of actors that are in need during the pandemic. People tend to have this idea that actors are sitting around in their, floating in their swimming pools, drinking margaritas all day, plucking dollar bills off of their trees. And so we were trying to raise an awareness of, we're hurting too. And people got it. People really got it. And when the episodes came out, they understood that we were what we were doing, what we were trying to accomplish, and that we were doing it for them. So we had a huge viewership amongst our peers in the acting community, but it spread much farther than that. So it was very gratifying for us to have that kind of a message, seep into other, areas that we had no idea what the impact was going to be. We ended up raising about $15,000 for the SAG Foundation, which at the end of the day is not a massive amount of money, but people were kicking in $1, $2, $3, and that was, that's all we wanted. and to have some fun for ourselves. So
Yeah, right. And it's $15,000 more than zero, and it's going to go somewhere and help someone, and that, even if it's just one or two people, is more than anything. And I guess also at the time when you were doing it, you guys were the only SAG-AFTRA project that was actually shooting at the time.
that was it. We were the only SAG-AFTRA contracted show. All of our actors were working under a Screen Actors Guild after a contract, and that meant a lot to us. I grew up in and around SAG-AFTRA. My mom was the first woman president of the Screen Actors Guild, so it's a union that's very close to my heart, and a cause that was very close to my heart. So that's why I wanted to be more hands-on with it. So it's something I'll be enormously proud of, forever. It was really a special thing to be able to do, and I don't know what I would have done with myself without it. I mean,
Master the ukulele, Spencer.
I'd be a better ukulele player and maybe a better chef.
Sure.
But now that we're done with our episodes, I'm back trying to learn how to.
Oh, fair enough. Then best of both worlds. Maybe that's a new show, the ukulele playing chef. You can get that as your next.
Not gonna happen.
No, not gonna happen. Worth a try. I thought I'd throw it out there. No, I think it's an amazing thing that you guys did, and I think also, when everybody was turning to the arts during that crazier period of lockdown, I think it was important to see that there were still things being made creatively, even though the bigger projects were all kind of being locked down and people were freaking out. That, artistically, that's always going to happen, and we'll just find a way and adapt and evolve like humans do. And almost, that you guys were showing the way, and in time, that's a moment within a moment, I suppose, that you're all going to look back on. And I don't think anyone's going to forget this year. And I think you guys will have an extra kind of marker in the sand when you look back to say, yes, it was lockdown and COVID, but also it's when we were the first.
Yeah.
I mean, how many other times in history, I don't know if how many times in history has there only been one SAG or SAG-AFTRA show or project happening in a month, and that's it? That must be an anomaly.
That was probably it.
Yeah.
That was probably it. Now it's interesting to see how many shows. I mean, if you read Deadline Hollywood, to see how many shows about relationships between people during the pandemic, during lockdown, are being greenlit. They're actually shows they're not ripping us off, but there are a lot of shows that are taking place on Zoom. So, I'm sure people saw Quarantine and, saw us as the model. Because like I said, if you watch, if you go along the 25 episodes, our tech team got more and more adept at editing and scoring and everything else. So everything we did, I mean, it was a real learning curve for all of us, and so learning how to crawl in this new medium, and then to be up and running 3-4 months later was really kind of special as well. But I will look back on 2020 as just absolute shit.
Yeah.
But that one experience.
There's a silver lining within the shit, if that's.
There's a silver lining within the shit, a nice little thread that runs through the shit.
Yep.
But yeah, this will be. It's the one thing that I can look back on and be very, very proud of.
I want to slightly shift, if we can, and talk
Shift
a little
away.
bit about you as a producer, and I find that always interesting and fascinating because you obviously have a very storied acting career. You've worked consistently in so many projects. You are the epitome of a working actor, and that you moved into having this producer role as well. At what point did that happen in your life? At what point did you have a switch where you thought that that's something you knew you'd have to move into or wanted to move into?
I think it's just about wanting to have more agency over the kinds of things you're able to do. I've always wanted to do it in the back of my mind. I mean, really, the first time was with America 2.0. That was the first time I I said, I need to have more ownership over this. Uh, I have been in a producerial capacity on a couple of smaller independent films, but probably the first time that I got the bug for it was in 2007. I did a little independent film called Below the Beltway, and it was a little political comedy that we shot in Washington, D.C. We shot it for $250,000. It was something that I was asked to come on board as an actor. And that was probably the first time that the light bulb went off, and I said to this first-time director, I said, "Let me produce this thing. Um, I'm going to find you the cast." And I just sort of dove in. I said, I'm gonna find you your dream cast, because I thought, well, I know I've been around a long time. I know people. I can get this script. It was a wonderful script, and that's why I wanted to do it. I thought, if I get this script to enough people that are so as turned on by it as I am, we can get this guy a dream cast. And it was also it was during the summer when things are traditionally slow. So he said, "Great, you're my producer." So I got the script into the hands of a lot of terrific actors who were like, "I'm in. Where do I sign?" Again, it was a ultra low budget, paying our actors scale plus 10. In some cases, ultra low budget or SAG modified scale, which is like between $300 and $500 a day. And actors, at the end of the day, they just want to work. I mean, they just want to work. And if the story is good enough and the writing is good enough and the team is good enough, they just want to get to work. So that was the first time I wore a producer hat, and the film ended up winning a bunch of awards. We sold it to Showtime. We did very well. We made our money back and then some. And it really became the little movie that could. It just kept chugging along, and it did very well for us. And that's when I kind of got a taste for it. And I thought, I think I'm pretty good at this. And so I've always, since Below the Beltway, I produced like 2 or 3 other things. And I think I've got a good knack for dealing with people and relationships. It's a business that's built on relationships. And so I kind of feel like that's my strong suit, is dealing with other actors and dealing with creatives and finding the best possible team. So not really until America 2.0 came along, 3 or 4 years later, was I able to kind of dig into something that was that substantial. But for me, I mean, I want to be able to do it more now that I'm partnered up with Jeremy, who's like the perfect partner for the kinds of things I want to do. We want to do, I think, small projects that are meaningful, that have, that tell great story, and with perfect cast. I mean, would I love to move into, higher budget stuff ultimately down the road? Probably, but I love the little micro budget stuff. To me, working on the independent films, I mean, I've worked on, Air Force One and Michael Bay films with, casts of hundreds and crews of hundreds with, multi-million-dollar budgets. To me, the best experiences that I've always had have been working on the small films with, a skeleton crew. And, those are the little families that sort of bond you together. I'm doing the film that I'm starting on Monday is I'm working with a director named Sean McGinley, who I did a film with 25 years ago called The Truth About Juliet. I think there was a cast of 4 or 5 or 6 people and a crew. I think we outnumbered the crew. And Sean asked me to come in and do a little bit. It's another little independent film. And I immediately said, he said, "You probably don't want to do this. You've moved on to other things." And I said, "Sean, what you're doing is exactly the kind of thing that I love. I started an independent film, and for me, those are the kinds of movies and stories that I want to tell."
I guess because it goes back to that word of agency as well that you spoke about, where
Yeah.
there's just, you're not, the creative control isn't dissipated amongst many, many people or executives. It is very much a collaboration between artists, and you can mold stuff a bit more, and it's
Well,
smoother.
so much of what we do just as actors is waiting for the phone to ring. Is waiting for your agent or your manager to say, you have an audition or a self tape for this, and I think I got to a point in my life in 2007 where I was tired of waiting for the phone to ring, and I thought you got to make your own stuff. You got to make your own stories.
So I find that really fascinating, and I couldn't agree with it more, because I think that's only one part of it. The audition game is obviously a huge part of what we do, but especially now, it's not the only way to be
Yeah,
creative and to work as an actor. And I think making your own stuff, to what you were talking about, lets you work on stories and create things that you want to talk about, because we all ultimately have a voice, and I think we can't always express our opinions or who we are in our essence through other people's material all the time.
yeah, yeah.
So I think that's important. But what I think is fascinating is you're saying that having worked consistently and a lot as an actor. And so my whole point of really asking the initial question of you getting into being a producer was, I suppose, for other actors that might tune into this, and to hear that and hopefully clock and go, yeah, okay, like I can still wait for the phone to ring and audition, but why am I going to waste the time? Like a decade could fly by and maybe nothing happens. Let me just take that first step.
Well, the beautiful thing is, now we all have these. Um, and I teach an acting class out here in Los Angeles, and and I tell my students, some of whom are very experienced, some of whom are very like right off the bus, and they're very green, and and they always say, well, what do we do in the meantime? What do we do while we're waiting for the phone to ring? Or we don't have an agent, we don't have a manager. Um, and the beauty is, go out and make your own movie, go out and make your own short film with this or an SLR, whatever it is, make your own content. And if it's good, it'll find its way. If you put it up on YouTube or Vimeo, I went scrolling around. I went back the other night to look at a film that I did, a television pilot that we shot 4 years ago on Vimeo, and that's been up on Vimeo, that's been living on Vimeo for years. And I went back to look at some stuff in it, and all of a sudden, I started scrolling around and looking, and I went down this rabbit hole of looking at short films on Vimeo, and there's so much good stuff out there. So if your work is good, it'll find its way out into the universe. It'll find its way to the right people. So as far as with my acting students, I'm always telling them, keep reading plays, keep watching movies, keep saturating yourself, and learning and growing, and keep reminding yourself why you're in this craft to begin with, and in this business to begin with, but also be the author of your own story. Um, be the hero of your own story, and make your movie. Make your movie. Put up your play. Always be creating. That's my mantra all the time, is always be creating. Whether it's learning how to cook or play the ukulele or whatever. For me, I'm always, I feel like I'm always in motion. So that's you have to be like that now more than ever. You turn on you look at Netflix or Amazon, you see there's the thousands of content that's out there. Um, it's extraordinary. I mean, it's a great time to be an actor and a filmmaker right now. It really is.
Well, especially because with all of these streamers and all these platforms, their
Yeah.
need for content, we maybe assume is finite. But the fact is, I think the game is going to change where, you'll be shown a totally different set of movies and shows to what I'll be shown, based on my preferences, how I
Yeah.
viewed stuff before. I'm sure eventually they'll look at my buying behavior, and based on what I purchased, then decide that then warrants to show me certain types of projects and films.
Yeah.
And so that means that, okay, maybe there won't be that many huge blockbuster or mega shows that reach the entire global populace. They'll still exist, but for the smaller projects that could hit like an audience of 500,000 people or 100,000, or there's like 10,000 people that saw this little like innocuous independent film, and to a big studio that might seem nothing, but to a starting filmmaker, that's an audience. That's people watching your work, and the micro distribution side is fascinating. And I think for an actor to get our head into that game is empowering. I think I've always found that since I did that, it helped me as an actor. I don't know how you feel. Do you feel as an actor, by getting into producing, your acting is not changed, but has anything shifted in the acting side, or
nothing for me. No, I honestly can say that it's not, because I literally put on one hat and take off another one. I mean,
Gotcha.
Am I more self-conscious of the work that I do in the things that I'm producing? Is that what you're asking? Or
I guess it was a pretty open and broad question, to be fair.
yeah, no, I mean, they're two totally separate things. I mean, it was interesting when we were making Quarantine. When we were Jerry would be directing the actors on Zoom, and I would be, right before we were about to roll, I would, if I wasn't in the scene, I would say good morning to everybody, and we would sort of have a little pregame chit chat before they would get into the scene, and then I would sort of, I would FO, I'd get off screen and click off, and I'd be watching behind the scenes. I'd be watching what the actors were doing, and Jerry was sort of new to directing actors, I think, at this point, to directing episodically. And so Jeremy and I would be kind of off camera, and we'd be able to sort of text Jerry and sort of give him suggestion, because I'm being the grizzled veteran of the group, I would sort of have I would give kind of editorial decision and directorial decision input as far as what I think would work in the scene. And sometimes we would all, we would pause, we would have a sidebar, and I would get on the phone, I'd call Jerry and I'd say, hey, Jerry, I don't think this is working, or this is really working well, but maybe you should try, thus and such. So it was good to have, creative input. It was very collaborative. Sometimes it got a little clashy, because we all had different ideas about how we wanted the thing to go. Also because, like I said, we were flying by the seat of our pants, but it was a really great collaboration, and it was great to see, especially doing something over Zoom, to be able to text with my director and say, this is what's working, and do more of that, or add more salt, or add more pepper, take something out. And it was fascinating to do it that way, in that realm, and it was nice to have that kind of creative input.
And I guess the speed of it too, to be able to get that.
And the speed of it too, because we were trying to knock out scenes. We were trying to make these little 6-7 minute episodes, so they had to have a certain flow and a certain pace, and that was difficult to navigate as well. So we wanted to be able to make eye-catching, interesting, theater over this little Zoom platform, but also to keep it as real as possible. If you look at the episodes, there's nothing shticky or over the top. It's all very, reality based. It's all very grounded in, in people's personal reality with what they're going through, in lockdown. So
yeah, I think because if people read obviously the logline or synopsis, and they see that it's about a soap cast of soap actors, I think maybe there's the default thought where you go, oh well, this is going to be soapy in its style, but actually it's the antithesis of that, and it's almost that mockumentary in some ways of
kind of, yeah. It had sort of a mockumentary feel. I mean, I'm sure there were moments that were sort of over the top and silly, but we're all, we're vain, silly actors. I mean, as actors, we are sometimes vain, sometimes silly people. So the soap opera world, which is something that is foreign to me, a couple of the actors had come from that world. A couple of the actors that had been on soaps and spent time on soaps, Alicia Minshew, who played my matriarchal counterpart, Ella Thomas. They came, they were in the soap world, and they're like, no, it would be much more over the top than this. It'd be more like the movie Soap Dish. Some of these actors were just so,
Wow.
so vain and so, so pushy and over the top. So they were almost playing it a little too real. So it was funny to see, to get insight into the world of that, that
Wow.
behavior.
Wow. Crazy. Do you think you'd ever get into directing? Does that appeal to you?
I've directed a ton of theater,
Yeah.
but haven't directed film or TV yet. So yeah, that's hopefully that's the next move. But I love acting so much. I mean, it's not something that I'm ever gonna, peel off of and getting to producing. I mean, producing's fun. It's a fun other creative hat to wear, but acting is and will always be my main passion.
And I mean, acting's been sort of in your, I guess, in your DNA from day one, I suppose. Was
Yeah.
it? I mean, like you said before, with your mom being president of SAG, and then I think was your dad a manager or an agent, a manager?
He was a talent agent for 50 years, but my grandparents were both actors. They ran a theater on a showboat on the Mississippi River. If you picture like a showboat with a paddle wheel and all that, based in St. Louis on the Mississippi River, it was called the Goldenrod Showboat, and it was sort of a legendary boat that had a theater on it, and it was docked in St. Louis. And my mom and my aunt, who's also an actor, and my grandma and grandpa ran this theater, and the boat would go up and down the Mississippi River, and they would stop in little towns along the way, and people from the town would get onto the showboat, and they'd do a theater. It was sort of a vaudeville kind of stuff. So my mom has been acting since she was 2. My grandparents were both actors well into their 60s and 70s. And my dad was a talent agent. So I like I tell people a lot of times, if I had the sense God gave a donut, I would have run in the other direction when I saw how crazy this life is. But once I got my first laugh on stage in high school, that was I was kind of like, oh, yeah, I'm stuck now.
Had you tried to sort of, prior to that moment, not really follow in those footsteps because it was such a big thing in your family, or was it just organically?
I didn't rebel against it, but when I got out of college, I lived in Washington, D.C. for a couple of years, and I worked for National Public Radio. I worked for NPR. I worked on Capitol Hill. I wore a suit and carried a briefcase, and I had sort of a different life there. But I was also doing theater at the same time, but I don't know that I was particularly good at it. I mean, I did theater in high school and college, but I don't know. I was very green and not trained. And so when I moved to New York after Washington, I started studying with a man named Sanford Meisner, who was sort of a legendary acting teacher. And I auditioned for him, and he saw that there was some potential there. And so, I kind of threw my hat in the ring. I jumped into class with Sandy Meisner, and I ended up staying with him for about 7 years in his acting class off and on. And, my first meeting with him and my first class with him, he would tell all of the class, he'd say, it takes 20 years to become an actor, to become a good actor.
Wow.
There was a sort of a collective moan, in the class.
Can you imagine today, when today's like expectation levels are immediate? There'd be more than
Exactly.
a moan.
Well, nobody has that level of patience now,
Yeah.
which is unfortunate. It's because we live in such a, in this culture of fame, and I call it the Kardashianization of our culture, where people want to, they're not trained, and they jump right, they get a television series, or they get a quick little flicker of fame. But but for me, I mean, maybe I guess I'm just old school, but I mean, when he said it takes 20 years, um, I think at the time I was sort of, wow, that's a long time. And I was 22 at the time. And I thought, so is he saying that I'm not going to get good until I'm like 44?
Hmm.
And he was kind of right.
Huh.
I didn't, I mean, I worked a lot. I was lucky enough to be consistently working, but I don't think I really found my sweet spot until I was in my late 30s, early 40s. Not just in terms of the quality of jobs that I was getting, but just in terms of the I'd kind of settled into myself as an actor. I'd sort of found uh, I'd found a way to I'd found a way to be good, I guess.
I guess it's that 10,000 hours Malcolm Gladwell thing of, the more you do something and do it with a degree of strong craft behind it, the more
Yeah,
that you hone that muscle. And then the
yeah.
repetition just lets you feel like you've got that craft there. But I guess would another part of that just be, skin in the game from a life perspective? I think at 38,
Probably.
40.
I'm sure a lot of it has to do with, I had skin in the game, and I developed. I'd like to think I developed a reputation,
Mhm.
after a certain point and a certain amount of years logged in the business, and so by the time I was about 20 years in, uh, I was thought of as a guy who could, you could bring him off the bench and put him in the game, and he'll hit a single or a double for you. Um, to,
Reliable. And that's the overnight success reliability that comes into play, but it's, 15, 20 years after your first class with.
oh yeah, I mean, it's funny. I've had little flickers of that overnight success moment over the years with various projects that I've done. Um, Last year, I got lucky and I had a little bit in the last Tarantino film, in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood,
Mm.
and and it was fun to be a part of the ride of the publicity ride and the wave of popularity that film had, and I had a nice little take. I rode that wave uh, for as long as I was allowed to be a part of this movie that became part of the zeitgeist, and so I had like a late career flicker of what it's like to have that little bit of that little taste of that lovely taste of fame. But I've always been conscious of the fact that it's gone. It goes away the next day. I've had lots of moments, but I'm also aware that those moments are fleeting.
It's like life.
Because
It's like anything in life.
yeah, but
Ultimately,
it's like life. But sometimes a lot of actors get sort of caught up in it, and they
sure.
feel like that's what they're there for. For me, I rode that lovely wave that the Tarantino film um, put me on. But as soon as it was over, as soon as the wave crested, and and crashed into the shore, I thought, okay, that was really nice, and now back to work.
Sure.
You know.
Which is what it's about. I just think that soundbite of what Sandy said, that it takes 20 years, is such an important message and lesson.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be mark your calendar for 20 years from now verbatim. It's more the ethos of
Yeah.
you have to want this and put in the time and the effort and the craft, and the why behind what you're doing it for has to be strong, like
Yeah.
anything. And I don't know. I'd like to think that's still being taught today, but I know from the classes I've had in different places, I've not quite heard it as directly as that. And I
Well, I
think,
know that I teach that. I mean, in the classes that I teach, I very much echo Sandy's sentiment that not only does it take 20 years of good, solid, hard work and putting in the craft, and putting in the legwork, and like we were talking about earlier, constantly feeding yourself with information that feeds into your work as an artist, your life as an artist, whether it's doing play readings. I had a Monday night play reading group at my house for 10 years. 20 actors, and we would sit around and we would eat pizza and drink wine, and we would read a play every Monday night. Things like that just were so important to me in my upbringing as an actor, that just constantly reminded me that you have to always be honoring this profession that you've chosen.
It's fascinating. I was talking to Gary Zuckerbrod last week, and he came on and said he's great, and some of the stories were awesome. And he was saying that when he was starting out in New York early on, he remembered going in, and he was taken under the wing of his boss in casting. And one of the first jobs he had, they went to some little community theater or arts house in New York at a time when, it was booming. And he remembers walking in and seeing Harvey Keitel, and I think he said it was De Niro. So at least Keitel. And it was both of them just sat there on like a Monday afternoon, just reading a play, just because. And, I don't know why, maybe sometimes as actors, we feel like we have to hear that and see that that's what the famous actors were doing and are doing, to think that that's whatever the soundbite is, like, to get people to tap into that. I just think
I love that story. Speaking of Zuckerbrod, I mean, Gary is a guy who loves actors. I can't say that every casting director that I've encountered in my life loves actors. If I was going to be a casting director and around actors all the time, you have to love the business that you're in, and you have to love the idea of giving actors jobs and nurturing their careers. Gary has always been that for me. He's always been somebody that I love getting an appointment with Gary, because I know I'm walking into a friendly room, because he wants every actor that he reads for that role. If there are 12 guys, if I walk in the waiting room and I see, Bob and Jim and Ted and, all guys that we see each other in the rooms all the time, Gary wants every one of us to get that job. One of us is lucky enough to book the gig, but Gary wants you all to do it, and he treats every actor. That's what the casting director's job is. So I'm glad you got a chance to talk to him, because I'm a big fan.
He was great. And
speaking of Tarantino, I mean, he cast, did he do Reservoir? I know he did Pulp Fiction.
He did Pulp Fiction. It was Pulp Fiction. Yeah.
Ronnie Yeskel.
Yeah, right after Reservoir Dogs. And
he cast Pulp Fiction with another casting director, a woman named Ronnie Yeskel, who is somebody that was a champion of mine when I was a young kid actor, when I came to LA, who just loved actors. And she saw something in me, and she kept bringing me into her rooms to read for stuff. And the very first job that I was ever straight offered, with ever having to audition, came from Ronnie, because she convinced the director. She's like, you don't need to read this guy. Just hire him.
Wow.
Because she had that confidence in me. But going back to something you said earlier, Ash, is, you have to want it in your blood and in your bones. Sandy said to me in my interview with him at 21 years old, he's like, do you really want to do this for the rest of your life? And I said, yeah, I think I do. And he said, no, you can't think that you do. You have to know that this is it. This is your path. And you have to want it in your soul. You can't half-ass it. You can't, maybe I want to be an actor. Maybe I want to try it out. Like, if you're jumping in the pool, you got to jump in with your whole heart and soul, because otherwise it's not worth it. You can't go halfway in this business.
Well, there's just too much instability, I suppose, is the term. No. I mean, there's so much uncertainty, I guess, with the industry. There is no formula, and we all love formulas as humans to try and logically figure out a path, and there just isn't one. And to your point earlier, like you said, you do Once Upon a Time, you ride the wave, and then that dissipates and it's onto something else, and you're in a plateau. And then maybe the plateau will peak again whenever that might be. And then that dip, comes back down again just naturally, and you can't time that or control it really.
Yeah.
And it's not like working in a bank where you could sort of work your way up the hierarchy, and it takes a certain amount of mental and spiritual awareness and toughness to be able to navigate that
You got to
uncertainty.
have a thick skin. You got to have a thick skin because it's a business of, of getting a door slammed in your face a lot. You got to learn how to live with that and shake it off and not take it personally.
Yeah. And sometimes I think that's just repetition of getting that happen enough to just eventually get to a point where you're like, okay, fair enough. Perspective is that actually that's not the most important thing in the world anyway. And I guess if we kind of full circle this and go back to where we started, which was the whole, COVID period and this shitty year, maybe another extra small silver lining to add on to the one we've already put is perhaps the perspective that might come out of it for some, if not hopefully many of us, because no matter what we do in life, I do think that when everything stops the way it has, and there's been such a crazy change and grief of what we had and loss of life, you also kind of hopefully take stock and go, were all the things that I was thinking were important actually that important? And when whatever we move into down the line happens, can we have more of a balance with how we approach life and work and other people and not get so caught up in the stuff that we deemed so life and death? Because not getting an audition isn't necessarily life or death. Yes, it might be money that could help us. I get that's sure, but it's not. It's a privilege to get to audition as well. A lot of the times, it's not.
It is.
It's not. It's not COVID in a ventilator in a hospital without family around you because they can't. That's the reality of, all of it. So
yeah.
I don't know if I really had a point to that. It just kind of came to me, but I felt like that was.
I got it. Yeah. I got it. Yeah.
I like to wrap these up with the questions that James Lipton used to ask on Inside the Actor Studio. So if you'll indulge me, I'd like to hit you with those and just see what your answers would be.
Go.
Okay. The first one is, what is your favorite word?
Yes.
What is your least favorite word?
No.
What turns you on in a creative, spiritual, intellectual kind of way?
Being inspired by good work, whether it's on screen or on stage, or watching a baseball player's beautiful swing, or Michael Jordan, making a 30-foot jumper at the buzzer. Seeing people at the peak of their craft, in the zone, is an incredible turn on to me.
Absolutely. Yeah. Did you watch The Last Dance?
Sure.
On that? Of course.
Thrice I've watched it. I've watched it 3 times through. It's great.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
What turns you off? The flip side of that last question.
Probably. Well, I don't know if it's the flip side of that answer, but too much ego, unnecessary ego, or ego for the wrong reasons. I find that unnecessary ego and unnecessary pride sometimes get in the way of people's real purpose in life, and so. I have my share of ego as well. I'm guilty of it. So when I recognize it in others and I see people, acting in that way, it's a turn off to me. So I don't know if that's a good answer or not, but I think, but ego used for the wrong reasons or put to the wrong purpose is something that is, that does not sit well with me.
Yeah, I hear you. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. I just think there's whatever it is. I think we all have that ego, I guess, in some capacity. It's when it's uncontrolled and untamed and running rampant, such as certain leaders of different countries in the world, not just yours, but the one I'm in as well.
Mhm.
It's a good reflection
Mhm.
of that being rampant. The next question is, what is your favorite curse word?
Ha.
And you can
Well,
pass. You can pass if you don't want to say it, which is totally fine. Um, and send it to me in a message, and then I'll say it.
it rhymes. I seem to have been saying it a lot more lately, or maybe let's say in the last, say, since November 4th of 2016.
Uh huh. Uh huh.
It is a word that rhymes with the word punt.
Yeah, I thought that's where you might have been going with that. Yeah, I
I
wasn't
spent
quite
a lot of
sure.
time in Ireland. I spent 20 summers in Ireland growing up as a kid. And so it is a word that is kind of thrown about in a colloquial way, um, in
Yeah.
a jocular way. So I've used it. I use it um, sometimes. Oh, that person is such a. Um, but then I use it in sort of a lighthearted way as well.
Yeah.
There's a wonderful actor named Neil McDonough,
Hmm.
uh, who you know from a million things, a very dear old friend of mine, and you can't get more Irish than Neil McDonough. We both have our clotter rings on, and so whenever we call each other, we say, "How the hell are you, you fucking cunt, you?" So
And
that's our friendly way of greeting each other. But then if we're talking about maybe politicians that we don't like, we can say, "Oh, that person is
yeah, yeah, yeah,
blah blah."
yeah.
So
And in some countries or in some cultures, there's just certain words that are just more accepted by the general lexicon of the
yeah,
populace. Fascinating.
it's a very it's very plug-inable, I find, lately, and it's gotten to be a little bit more accepted here.
Yeah, that's true. I actually agree with that. You go back 2 or 3 years, and that was literally like you're gonna get scolded for that, and it's
Yeah,
weird, weird.
yeah.
Um, what is your favorite sound or noise?
Wow. Um, I do love the sound of a of the crack of a bat on a baseball.
Mm,
Um, I love the sound of this isn't really a sound, but there's something about the rustling backstage right before you're about to when you're waiting in the wings to walk out onto a stage. Um, that's sort of that the nervous juices flowing, the energy that's flowing, rumbling off stage before you're about to walk on. It's not really a sound, it's more of a feeling.
but that bustle, that kind of you
That
can't.
bustle, yeah.
Yeah,
Um, I love hearing the word action,
yeah,
you know, the
yeah,
sound of the sound of the clapper,
yeah, yeah.
that's a great sound.
That is a good sound.
So
Uh,
I gave you three. We put them
all
all
are
together.
all are good. All are
Okay.
good. Yeah, when you're doing a TV project about the theater, when the clapper goes down, and we just amalgamate all of those sounds into one.
Sure. Yeah.
What's your least favorite sound or noise?
Maybe because I live in LA, but man, I hate a horn. I hate a honking horn. Um, and people use it for the wrong reasons a lot here.
Hmm.
So I'm particularly attuned in a negative way to the sound of a honking horn.
That'll
Uh,
do it. 10 million people, all with cars, or many families with two or three cars.
we live in our cars out here in LA, so I'm always on the freeway, and so yeah, it's not a sound that I like.
Yeah, I hear that. Final few questions. What job or profession other than your own would you most like to attempt?
Wow. Uh, I'm a journalist, I think. I've always been um, attracted to the lives of, Ben Bradley, the Washington Post. And
Hmm.
there's something, I don't know if it's quite so romantic anymore, but I'm a big fan of some of the great journalists, particularly now, like seeing what Bob Woodward has done and, has been doing for the last 40 years. I always thought that I don't know whether I would have the patience or the tenacity for it, But to be a good journalist and a good writer and a good reporter, that always seemed very very romantic to me and fascinating to me. So that's probably what I would do if I weren't doing this.
Was that the kind of kernel or little catalyst that took you to do that little stint at NPR way back when, do you think? That passion for
Uh,
truth telling and sort of,
I think so. I
yeah.
mean, because I was always a fan of NPR, and and a fan of a show called All Things Considered,
Mhm.
that is still on the air. This American Life, which is a great show on NPR that's hosted by Ira Glass, great storytelling. So probably so, yeah. But I grew up in and around public radio as a kid too, and public broadcasting, public TV, and the idea of bringing good stories, human stories into people's homes, and I love radio. I love turning on the radio in my house and just listening, that old fashioned,
Mm.
not the visual, just the hearing somebody telling a story over the radio is quite a gift. And I listen to a lot of old time radio stuff, like radio dramas from the 30s and
Okay.
40s, which is really wonderful. A lot of those actors, I mean, before television and film, they were doing radio
Sure,
dramas,
sure.
and to convey a story, to be able to convey a writer's words and and thoughts and intentions over the radio, to be able to act that and have that transcend through the airwaves without seeing the visual, is something that's always been fascinating to me. So.
And that must have been extra special to then have got to do in sort of what is Radio 2.0 with podcasting, to
Oh
get to
yeah.
do the show that you got to do, because it's very much
Done a
a
lot.
throwback.
I've done a lot of. There's a thing out here called LA Theater Works where they do radio dramas, and they get terrific actors. I did The Lion in Winter years ago with Alfred Molina, and I did Medea with Kathleen Chalfant. I've gotten to work with wonderful
Wow.
actors just doing radio dramas. We perform it in front of a live audience on a stage in a theater, but then it is broadcast out over the radio a couple of months later after editing it. So it gave me a sense of what it was like, those guys back in the day, that did radio shows. So I love
There's
it.
there's a show in there somewhere, isn't there? Like a behind the scenes of that era.
Yeah,
The get Aaron Sorkin if he's not busy. Get him to write up
right,
something.
right.
Um,
If you look at Woody Allen's old movie Radio Days,
right.
it, there's a lot of great behind the scenes stuff.
Amazing. What job or profession would you never want to do under any circumstance?
Uh, Probably a politician.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Final question is a little bit more of an ethereal one. It is, what would you like the story of your life to be? What legacy do you want to leave behind?
Um, I'd like people to say that he was a good man, and that he lived his life with purpose, and he treated people well and with respect, and that he cared.
Amazing. I love that. Spencer, final moments to you, really. Any kind of last comments or remarks to sort of circle this off with, to leave people that are tuning in with? Any messages of advice, or just a final thought you want to close off with here?
I would say, this year has been so unbelievably challenging. We started out 2020 with, the fires in Australia, that were just
God,
horrific.
I
I
forgot
know
all.
it seems like 20 years ago, and you thought, well, God, that's the worst thing that's going to happen this year. And then it just seems like, every day there's some new
Something
crisis.
new. Yeah.
It just gets, I've lost track. I mean, being here in LA, I mean, during the riots, after George Floyd, and it's just one thing after another.
And
And
now, are there fires still happening in Northern California
fires,
and
there are
around the valley?
25 million acres of forest, the sequoia forest in Northern California. A lot
Yeah.
is burned down. Those 100-year-old
Yeah.
redwood trees. It's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking, and it's been heartbreak upon heartbreak upon heartbreak here in the States, particularly. But there's a lot of strife around the world, and sometimes it's hard to keep your head up and just to wake up every day thinking, you know, God, what now? But you just got to keep plowing forward and tell the people that you know, call somebody that you haven't talked to in a long time. Just call them up and say, hey, I'm thinking about you. You know, hug people more often if you're able to. You know, I miss hugging. I miss hugging people. It's, you know, it's tricky, but just pay attention to what's going on in the world around you and realize that we're only here for a short time, and you know, tell people that you love them, and tell them more often than not, because we need it now more than ever.
Yeah, and you'll never know when you won't have a chance to do it again. That's the other thing. Very
100%.
fleeting.
Yeah.
Spencer, where can people connect with you if they want to? Where can they find out more about quarantine or any upcoming projects that you want to promote?
Well, on Instagram, the Quarantine Show is still up and running. We did 25 episodes. It's you can find it at Quarantine the Show on Instagram TV, or on Instagram at Quarantine the Show. And then I am on Instagram. My personal Instagram page is Spencer Garrett 1, Spencer Garrett the number 1. And then on Twitter, I'm one Spencer Garrett at one Spencer Garrett. But yeah, Quarantine is up and running. So, you know, tune in, and we're still, you know, if you want to donate $1 or $2 to the SAG-AFTRA Foundation COVID-19 Relief Fund, we'd love it. We'd appreciate it. But if not, just appreciate the show and appreciate the actors and the work that went into it. It was a very, very special thing to have been a part of, and to have created during this really insane time. So to have made a nice little piece of art in the middle of a very difficult time is a very satisfying thing. So I appreciate your time. It was great to connect with you.
No, likewise. It's been great. It's been an awesome chat. We've kind of meandered through all kinds of different topics and
Yeah.
things, but it's been really great just to hear some of the stories and hear some of the stuff behind quarantine and some of the stuff you've worked on. It's been great. I appreciate it. And hopefully one day at some point, you know, we'll all be allowed to travel and can maybe come and have a socially distanced coffee out there in LA and say hi in person.
I would love it. I would love it so much, Ash. I really would.
Right. Spencer, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your day. I'm going to leave you to it.
All right, brother. God bless.
Take care. Right back at you. Bye-bye.